The applause was deafening, a roaring wave that crashed against my ears, but none of it was for me. I stood in the darkest corner of the ballroom, my fingers gripping the stem of a cheap champagne glass so hard I thought it might shatter. Ladies and gentlemen. My father, Robert Vance, raised his voice, booming through the microphone. I present to you the future of Vance Corp, the green tech proposal. The crowd cheered. The lights swiveled, blindingly bright, landing not on me, but on the woman standing next to him. Sarah, my sister. She beamed, waving like royalty. She wore a shimmering silver gown that hugged her figure perfectly. I looked down at my own dress drab, navy blue, bought off the rack 3 years ago. This proposal will change the industry, Father continued, placing a proud hand on Sarah's shoulder. And it is all thanks to the brilliance of my daughter, Sarah Vance. My breath hitched. No, I whispered. The person next to me, an old investor, glanced at me. Did you say something, dear? That's my proposal, I stammered, my voice trembling. I wrote it. I did the research. Sarah didn't even read the final draft. The investor just chuckled, turning back to the stage. Sure, honey, just enjoy the drinks. I couldn't stand it. I set my glass down on a passing tray and pushed through the crowd. I reached the edge of the stage just as my father stepped down, Sarah trailing behind him to accept compliments. Father, I said, stepping into his path. He stopped, his smile vanishing instantly. He looked at me like I was a stain on his expensive suit. Elara, what are you doing? You're making a scene. You said you'd credit me, I said, my voice shaking. We had a deal. I did the work. You said I'd get the position of project lead. Sarah laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made my stomach turn. Oh, Elara, be realistic. Can you imagine me leading a press conference? It's my work, Sarah. Lower your voice, Father hissed, grabbing my arm. He pulled me close, his cologne overpowering and suffocating. Look at your sister, Elara. Look at her. I looked. She was radiant, confident, surrounded by admirers. Now look at yourself, Father whispered harshly. You are plain. You are invisible. Vance Corp needs a face, not a shadow. Go home. He shoved me away lightly, then turned back to a photographer with a bright smile. Yes. Over here. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and humiliating. I turned and ran. I needed air. I needed Julian. I pushed open the heavy glass doors leading to the garden. The night air was cool, biting against my flushed skin. I hurried down the stone path toward the gazebo, our usual meeting spot. Julian, I called out softly. Are you here? I froze. 2 silhouettes stood in the moonlight. One was tall, wearing the tuxedo I had helped pick out yesterday. The other was shimmering in silver. Julian was holding Sarah's hands. He was leaning in close, his forehead resting against hers. Julian? My voice cracked. They jumped apart. Julian spun around, his eyes wide. Sarah just smirked, smoothing her dress. Elara, Julian said, raising his hands. I didn't think you'd be out here. You're with her? I asked, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. Why? We're engaged. Technically, we haven't set a date, Sarah chimed in, stepping closer to him. She placed a hand on his chest. He didn't push it away. I looked at him, begging him with my eyes to step away from her. Julian, tell her to stop. He looked down, refusing to meet my gaze. Elara, look. Things are complicated. What is complicated about my fiancé holding my sister's hands while she steals my career? I screamed. It's not just the career, Elara, Julian snapped, finally looking at me. His eyes were cold. Look at tonight. Sarah is the star. She's going places. She's going to run the company one day. And I'm the one who does the work. I yelled. It doesn't matter who does the work, Julian said, his voice dropping to a pitying tone. It matters who owns the room. I need a wife who matches my ambition, Elara, someone who can elevate me. And I don't? He sighed, shaking his head. You're sweet, you're loyal. But you're just you. You're safe. Sarah is a prize. My heart didn't just break. It shattered into dust. So that's it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 3 years together. And you're trading me for a promotion and a pretty face? Don't be dramatic, Sarah said, linking her arm through his. You were never going to fit in our world, Elara. We're doing you a favor. Go find someone simpler. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring, the modest silver band he'd given me. He didn't even hand it to me. He placed it on the stone bench between us. "I think it's best if you leave, Elara," Julian said. "Before you embarrass yourself further." I looked at the ring. Then I looked at them, the beautiful monster and the weak coward. "Keep it," I choked out. I turned around and walked away. I didn't run this time. I walked, feeling every jagged piece of my life falling apart behind me. They thought I was nothing. They thought I was just a shadow. But as I reached the dark street, wiping the tears from my face, one thought screamed louder than the pain. "I will make you regret this, both of you." The elevator doors chimed, opening onto the sleek, glass-walled floor of Vance Corp. I kept my head high, ignoring the whispers of the receptionists. I wasn't here to fight. I was just here to get my personal files and leave. But when I reached my cubicle, not an office, despite my title, my father was already there. He stood by my desk, holding a thick manila envelope. "You have the audacity to show your face here?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I came for my things, Father. Then I'm gone." He threw the envelope onto the desk. It slid across the surface and hit my hip. "You're not resigning, Elara. You're being terminated. Immediately." I frowned, picking up the packet. "Terminated? On what grounds?" "Corporate espionage," he spat the words out like poison. "We found evidence that you emailed the green tech blueprints to our competitors last night." My jaw dropped. "That's insane. I wrote those blueprints." "Why would I leak my own work?" "Because you knew Sarah was getting the credit," he countered smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks. "You did it out of spite. To sabotage her launch. Sarah set me up," I shouted, slamming the envelope down. "Check the server logs, check the IP address. You know she's capable of this." "I know that Sarah is the future of this company," he said coldly. He pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Security to the 14th floor. We have a trespasser. Father, please. You can't do this. This is my career." He turned his back to me. "You should have thought of that before you betrayed this family. Get her out of here." Two burly guards in gray uniforms appeared moments later. One grabbed my arm. "Miss Vance, you need to come with us. Don't touch me." I yanked my arm back, grabbing a cardboard box from the floor. I swept my notebook and a framed photo of my mother into it. "I'm leaving." They escorted me to the lobby like a common criminal, marching me past the gaping stares of employees I had worked with for 3 years. They shoved me out the revolving doors and onto the sidewalk. Of course, it had started to rain. I stood there, soaked within seconds, clutching the soggy cardboard box against my chest. The cold seeped into my bones, but the numbness in my heart was worse. I fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers and dialed the only number I had left. "Elara?" Nina's voice was a warm lifeline. "What's wrong? You sound like you're hyperventilating." "They fired me," I sobbed, the dam finally breaking. "Nina, can you come? Please. I'm already in the car." "Send me your location." "Don't move." 10 minutes later, a beat-up red Honda screeched to the curb. Nina jumped out, ignoring the rain, and threw her arms around me. "I'm going to kill them," she hissed into my hair. "I'm going to burn that building down." She shoved me into the passenger seat and drove us to her tiny apartment. She wrapped me in a blanket and shoved a mug of hot tea into my hands, but I couldn't stop shaking. "He believed her, Nina," I whispered, staring at the steam rising from the mug. "He didn't even check the logs. He just wanted me gone." "Because you threatened them," Nina said fiercely, pacing the small living room. "You have the talent. Sarah has the glitter. They know that without you, the work doesn't get done. So they had to destroy you to keep her safe." I cried until my throat was raw, mourning the years I wasted trying to please a man who never loved me. Eventually, the tears stopped. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face and looked up. The woman in the mirror looked pale, hollow, and broken. Her eyes were red, her hair plastered to her skull. "Look at you," I whispered to my reflection. "Pathetic." I traced the line of my jaw. Julian wanted ambition. Father wanted a winner. Sarah wanted a victim. I straightened my spine. The ache in my chest began to harden into something cold and sharp. "You're right, Nina," I called out, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. "Right about what?" She asked from the other room. "They had to destroy Elara Vance to protect themselves." I stared into my own eyes in the glass. Well, it worked, I said softly. The old Elara is dead. I'm sorry, Miss Vance, the position has been filled. But I haven't even interviewed yet, I pressed, gripping my phone tighter. Yesterday you said my resume was impressive. We ... Received some new information regarding your departure from Vance Corp. We are interested in candidates with liability issues. Good luck. Click. I stared at the black screen of my phone. That was the 10th rejection in 2 weeks. Sarah wasn't just content with stealing my work. She had poisoned the well. She had branded me a corporate spy, and in this city, reputation was everything. I dropped the phone into my bag and slumped against the hard wooden slats of the park bench. It was the middle of the workday, and everyone else was rushing to meetings or lunches. I was invisible. I pulled out my battered notebook. I couldn't work, but I couldn't stop thinking. My brain needed a puzzle to solve, or I would drown in the depression hovering at the edges of my mind. I flipped to a fresh page and started sketching a distribution network, correcting the flaws I knew existed in the green tech proposal. That looks like a headache. I jumped slightly. An old man in a worn-out trench coat had sat down next to me. He held a paper bag of birdseed. It's just a diagram, I muttered, turning back to the page. Doesn't look like art, he said, tossing a handful of seeds to a flock of pigeons gathering at his feet. Looks like a supply chain. I paused, looking at him. He had unruly white hair and thick glasses, looking like a grandfather who had wandered away from a nursing home. It is, I said. It's a correction. For what? For Vance Corp's new initiative. The one everyone is celebrating. I tapped the page aggressively with my pen. They're celebrating a ticking time bomb. They structured the intake based on current lithium prices, not projected scarcity. In 3 months, their margins will collapse. The old man stopped feeding the birds. He turned slowly to look at my notebook. Lithium scarcity? The market reports say supply is stable for another 2 years. The market reports are lazy, I snapped, frustration bubbling over. They're looking at mining output, not processing bottlenecks in the shipping lanes. Look here. I angled the notebook toward him. I didn't know why I was explaining this to a stranger feeding pigeons, but I was desperate for someone to listen. Just one person. See this note? I pointed to my messy sketch. They're rooting for the eastern ports to save money. But if the volume increases by even 10%, which it will, if the launch succeeds, the customs backlog will delay shipments by 6 weeks. They won't be able to fulfill orders. Stock drops, panic selling, bankruptcy. The old man stared at the diagram. His eyes, behind the thick lenses, were surprisingly sharp. They scanned the page with a speed that unnerved me. And how would you fix it? He asked quietly. I wouldn't route it through the east, I said immediately. I'd split the logistics. Absorb the higher shipping cost of the northern routes for the first 2 quarters. You lose short-term profit, but you guarantee delivery. Reliability builds the brand. Once you have market dominance, you renegotiate the shipping rates. He hummed a low, thoughtful sound. Profit sacrifice for long-term stability. Not a popular opinion these days. CEOs like quick wins. CEOs are idiots, I muttered, closing the notebook. Present company excluded, obviously. I assume you're not a CEO. He chuckled dryly. Me? I'm just an old man watching the birds. He crumpled the paper bag and shoved it into his pocket. You have a sharp mind, young lady. Who do you work for? No one, I said, the bitterness returning. And I won't be working for anyone anytime soon. I've been blacklisted. Blacklisted? My sister. She's very good at destroying people. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Anyway, I should go. I need to find a cheaper apartment before my savings run out. Wait. He reached into his coat pocket. I expected him to ask for spare change. Instead, he pulled out a plain white business card. It had no logo, just an address and a time. I have a project, he said. A small startup. It's a mess, honestly. Bleeding money. Management is incompetent. I looked at the card. You want me to consult? I want you to fix it, he said. If you're as smart as that notebook says you are, you'll know what to do. I told you I'm unhireable. If you check my references... I don't care about references, he interrupted, standing up. He was taller than he looked while sitting. I care about results. And you look like you have something to prove. He held the card out. I hesitated. It seemed sketchy, a random old man in a park, but I looked at his eyes again. There was no malice there, only a challenge. I took the card. 1400 Slate Street? 8 Is this a charity case? I asked suspiciously. It's a test, he said, turning to walk away. Don't be late. Wait, I don't even know your name, I called out. He didn't turn back. He just waved a hand over his shoulder. Be there at 8. Then we'll see if names matter. I watched him disappear down the path. I looked down at the card in my hand. It felt heavy, like a key to a door I wasn't sure I should open. But as the wind picked up, biting through my thin jacket, I realized I didn't have a choice. I had nothing left to lose. I checked the crumpled business card in my hand for the 4th time. Then I looked up at the building looming over me. 1400 Slate Street, I muttered. This isn't a startup. It was a skyscraper of steel and blue glass that pierced the clouds. The sign above the revolving doors read Sterling Global in polished chrome letters. This was the heart of the city's financial district, a place where people like my father begged for meetings and were usually denied. I smoothed my thrift store blazer, feeling ridiculously out of place, and walked to the front desk. I have a meeting with Silas, I told the receptionist. I don't have his last name, he gave me this card. I expected her to laugh and call security. Instead, her eyes widened. She tapped something into her computer and stood up immediately. Mr. Sterling is expecting you on the top floor. The private elevator is to your right. Sterling? I whispered. My stomach dropped. As in Silas Sterling? The legend. The man who built an empire from dirt. The man I had lectured about lithium prices while he fed pigeons. The elevator ride was a blur of panic. When the doors opened, I wasn't met with a busy office, but a cavernous, silent boardroom. At the far end, sitting at the head of a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on, was the old man. He wasn't wearing his trench coat. He was in a suit that cost more than my tuition. You're late, Silas said, not looking up from a file. It's 8:02. The elevator, I managed to say, stepping onto the plush carpet. It's slow. It's not slow. You hesitated in the lobby. A young man standing by the window turned around. He was striking sharp jawline, dark eyes that assessed me with zero warmth, and a posture that screamed deficiency. This is her? The young man asked, his voice skeptical. Silas, you found her on a park bench. I found her correcting a supply chain model in her head, Liam, Silas replied, finally looking up. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. Elara, sit. This is Liam, my lead consultant. He thinks I'm senile. I think you're overly optimistic, Liam corrected, crossing his arms. He looked at me. Miss Vance, I looked you up. Terminated for corporate espionage? Fabricated, I said, my voice hardening. I sat down, meeting his gaze. If I were a spy, I'd have sold the data and be on a beach right now, not looking for work. Liam didn't blink. Fair point. But desperation makes people dangerous. Desperation makes people work harder, I countered. Silas chuckled. Enough, let's get to business. He slid a thick binder across the table. It was labeled Nexus. You thought you were coming to a startup, Silas said. Nexus is a subsidiary of Sterling Global. It's a tech firm we acquired 2 years ago. It has burned through $50 million and hasn't turned a profit in 18 months. It's a corpse, Liam added bluntly. I've advised Silas to liquidate it. Cut the losses. I opened the binder, ran numbers everywhere. Declining sales, bloated management. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because I want you to fix it, Silas said. I froze. Me? I was a junior analyst 3 weeks ago. And now you're nothing, Silas said brutally. Which means you have no bad habits, no ego to protect. I don't need a CEO who plays golf. I need a mechanic. He leaned forward, his expression intense. You have 3 months, Elara. You will step in as the interim director of operations. You have full autonomy. If the company is still in the red after 90 days, I shut it down and you leave with nothing. And if I succeed? I asked. If you turn a profit, Silas said, I give you everything. Permanent CEO status, equity, and the power to crush anyone who doubted you. I looked at the file. Then I looked at Liam. He was shaking his head slightly, a silent warning that I was walking into a trap. It's impossible, Liam said to me. The staff is entrenched. The product is failing. You'll be the scapegoat when it collapses. Is that a concern for you, Liam? I asked. Or are you afraid a park bench hire might actually pull it off? Liam's eyes narrowed. A spark of challenge lit up his face. I'd love to see you try. I looked back at Silas. I thought of Sarah laughing on the stage. I thought of my father's dismissal. I closed the binder and placed my hand on top of it. When do I start? Silas smiled, a shark-like grin. Right now. Liam will show you to your office. Try not to let him scare you. I stood up, gripping the binder like a shield. He doesn't scare me. I've dealt with worse men than him before breakfast. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding against my ribs like a war drum. I was done being the victim. It was time to go to work. You can't be serious, the sales director, a man named Greg who spent more time on the golf course than in the office, laughed nervously. You can't fire me. I know where the bodies are buried. I don't care about the bodies, Greg, I said, not looking up from the spreadsheet on my tablet. I care that your department is bleeding $200,000 a month. You're terminated. Security is waiting outside. The room went deadly silent. Greg's face turned purple, but he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out. I looked around the conference room at the remaining terrified managers. Anyone else want to tell me why they haven't met a quota in 6 months? Silence. Good, I said. I pointed to a young woman in the back corner wearing a sweater that was too big for her. She had her head down. You, Maya, right? The data analyst? She jumped. Me? Yes, Ms. Vance. Your reports are the only ones that actually make sense, I said. You're the new head of strategy. Everyone else report to her by noon. As the room cleared, Liam remained, leaning against the wall with a mug of coffee. He raised an eyebrow. You're enjoying this, he said. I'm cleaning the wound, I replied, rubbing my temples. This place is infected with laziness. You fired 3 executives before lunch, Liam noted, walking over to inspect the prototype on the table. Silas will be impressed or terrified. Silas gave me a deadline. I don't have time for niceties. I joined him at the table, looking at the Nexus Smart Hub. It was a clunky black box with too many buttons. Look at this thing, Liam. It's hideous. It's functional, he argued. It connects all your devices. It requires a 60-page manual to turn on, I countered. Consumers don't want functional. They want easy. They want magic. I grabbed a screwdriver and popped the casing open. We're stripping it, 1 button. Voice activation only. And we paint it white, matte white. Liam watched me work, his skepticism slowly melting into something else. Curiosity. Rebranding? That's risky. Staying the same is suicide, I muttered, rewiring the connection. We worked until the city lights outside turned into a blur of neon. By 2 a.m., the office was empty except for us. The floor was littered with takeout boxes and crumpled schematics. Here, Liam said, sliding a fresh coffee toward me. He sat on the edge of my desk, looking tired but alert. Can I ask you something? If it's about the budget, no. It's not the budget, he said softly. Why are you like this? You fight like you're cornered even when you're winning. I paused, the warmth of the coffee cup seeping into my cold hands. I looked at the rain streaking the window. My sister, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She was the golden child. I did the work, she got the applause. My father fired me to protect her image. My fiancé left me for her because she was a star and I was nobody. Liam stayed silent, letting the words hang in the air. He didn't offer pity. He just nodded slowly, processing the information. They think I'm gone, I whispered. They think I'm crying in a dark room somewhere. Liam looked at me, his dark eyes intense. For the first time, I didn't see the arrogant consultant. I saw an ally. Don't just survive this, Elara, he whispered, leaning in. Make them regret it. Make them regret every single day they overlooked you. I looked at the stripped-down prototype on the desk raw, exposed, but ready to be built into something better. I will, I promised. You look dangerous, Liam said, offering me his arm as the valet opened the car door. I stepped out onto the red carpet, the flash of cameras blinding me for a second. I wasn't wearing navy blue tonight. I was wearing blood-red silk gown that draped over my body like liquid fire, with a slit that ran dangerously high up my thigh. Good, I whispered, taking his arm. I need to be dangerous. We have to close the deal with the supplier tonight, or Nexus runs out of parts by Tuesday. Relax, Elara, Liam murmured near my ear as we entered the ballroom. You've done the math. Now just play the part. The ballroom was suffocatingly opulent, filled with the same people who had ignored me for years. But tonight, heads turned. I felt eyes lingering on me, not sliding past me. "Is that?" I heard a whisper to my left. I froze. I knew that voice. Standing near the champagne tower was Julian. Beside him stood his college friend Mark, holding a half-empty glass. "Dude, no way," Mark said, nudging Julian hard in the ribs. "Is that the mousy girl you dumped?" Julian turned slowly. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His eyes widened, scanning me from my heels to the diamonds at my throat. His jaw actually dropped. "Elara?" he breathed. I tightened my grip on Liam's arm but kept my face completely neutral. "Hello, Julian," Mark. Julian took a step forward, his expression dazed. "You look incredible. I didn't know you were coming." "There's a lot you don't know," I said evenly. "Who are you here with?" Julian asked, his eyes darting to Liam with a flash of jealousy. "I thought you were Elara." The sharp, high-pitched voice cut through the air like a siren. Sarah appeared from the crowd, looking frantic. She hooked her arm aggressively through Julian's, staking her claim. She was wearing gold, but next to my red, she looked washed out. "I saw you from across the room," Sarah sneered, her eyes narrowing as she looked me up and down. "Rented dress? It's a bit flashy for someone unemployed, isn't it?" "It's hers," Liam said calmly, his voice cold. Sarah laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. She looked at Liam, then back to me, her lip curling in disgust. "Oh, I see. You couldn't make it on your own, so you found a rich boss to cling to, Elara? Is that your new job title? Assistant?" Julian looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, I don't." "Hush, Julian," she snapped at him, then smirked at me. "I suppose it fits you." Standing in the background while the men talk business. "Just try not to spill anything on the guests." The old Elara would have cried. The old Elara would have defended herself, listing her credentials, begging for respect. But I just felt bored. I looked at Sarah, I really looked at her and saw the desperation in her eyes. She was terrified of anyone outshining her. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Think what you want, Sarah," I said softly, my voice steady and amused. "But looking at the guest list, I'd worry less about my dress and more about your market share." "Excuse me?" she demanded, blinking. "Come on, Liam," I said, turning my back on them. "We have actual work to do." "Elara, wait," Julian called out, stepping forward. I didn't stop. I glanced back over my shoulder, locking eyes with Sarah one last time. "Enjoy the party, Sarah," I said. "You'll need the relaxation." We walked away, leaving them standing in stunned silence. "That," Liam whispered, suppressing a laugh, "was cold." "It felt good," I admitted, my heart soaring. "Now, where is that supplier?" "It's gone. All of it." "What do you mean gone?" I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, pacing the length of my glass-walled office. "The trucks, Elara? They've been impounded at the dock." Jerry, my warehouse manager, was shouting over the sound of engines and confused shouting in the background. Some guys in suits showed up with a cease and desist order. "They're claiming a safety violation on the batteries." "That's impossible," I snapped. "I checked the compliance forms myself. They were perfect." "Tell that to the guys putting chains on our gates." "Elara, if we don't get this shipment, the assembly line stops in 4 hours. We miss the launch." My stomach dropped to the floor. "Don't let them tow anything. Stall them, Jerry. I'm fixing this." I ended the call and slammed the phone onto the desk. "Trouble?" Liam asked. He didn't look up from his laptop, but his fingers stopped typing. "Sabotage," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "Our lithium shipment just got flagged for a safety violation that doesn't exist." Liam finally looked up, his expression darkening. "Vance Corp? It has to be. Nexus is climbing the charts." Sarah must have seen the quarterly projections. She doesn't know I'm running it, but she knows Nexus is a threat. I ran a hand through my hair, pulling at the roots. This is my father's signature move. Choke the supply chain, starve the competition, buy the bankrupt remains. "So, what's the plan?" Liam asked calmly. "I don't have a plan. I have 4 hours before the factory shuts down. If we miss the deadline, Silas dissolves the company. I lose everything." I felt the panic rising, a cold tide threatening to drown me. I grabbed my purse. I need to go down there. I need to beg them. "Elara?" Liam was in front of me in a second. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip firm, stopping me in my tracks. "Stop," he ordered. "Look at me." I looked up at him, my breathing ragged. "Panic is what they want," Liam said, his voice steady and grounding. "If you go down there screaming, you look weak. Think, Elara, you know how they operate. Who signed the order?" I blinked, forcing my brain to switch gears. "The Port Authority Director, Holloway." "Director Holloway," Liam repeated. "Is he a stickler for rules?" "No," I whispered, a memory surfacing. "No, he's a crook." I pulled away from Liam and rushed to my computer. "I used to organize my father's private poker nights. Holloway was always there. He loses, a lot." "Gambling debt?" Liam asked, moving to stand behind my chair. "Massive debt," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "If he's blocking our shipment, it's because Sarah paid him off. She probably covered his latest loss in exchange for this favor." "So we outbid her?" Liam suggested. "No," I said, my eyes scanning the public records on the screen. "We don't have the cash to outbid Vance Corp, but Holloway is sloppy. If he's taking bribes, he has to hide the money somewhere." "You're going to hack him?" "I don't need to hack him. I just need to look where no one else looks." I pulled up a list of Holloway's associated charities. "Here, the Holloway Foundation for Urban Youth. It has 0 employees and 1 donor." I clicked the file open. The donor was a shell company linked to a Vance Corp subsidiary. "Bingo," I whispered. "That's embezzlement and tax fraud." Liam leaned in, reading the screen. "That's a felony." "He'd go to prison for 10 years. I sat back, the panic completely gone. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "I'm not calling a lawyer," I said, grabbing my phone. "Lawyers take weeks. I need those trucks moving now. What are you going to do?" Liam asked, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I found Holloway's private #1 I had saved years ago when I was just the assistant getting him coffee. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse," I said. "This is dangerous, Elara. You're blackmailing a government official." I looked at Liam. I thought about the way my father had thrown me out. I thought about Sarah laughing at me. "I don't care about playing fair anymore, Liam," I said, hitting the dial button. "I need to win." "You have 5 minutes, Miss Vance," Director Holloway said, checking his gold Rolex as he slid into the booth across from me. "I'm a busy man. And frankly, I don't usually take meetings with disgraced assistants." I didn't blink. I took a slow sip of my water, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "I'm not an assistant anymore, Director," I said calmly. "And I think you'll find this meeting very worth your time. Is this about the Nexus shipment?" He laughed, a wet, dismissive sound. "Save your breath. That cargo is seized pending a federal investigation. There's nothing you can do." "Is that so?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin black folder. I slid it across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right in front of his plate of oysters. "What is this?" he asked, looking at it with disdain. "It's a receipt," I said. "For the donation you received yesterday? And the wire transfer you sent to the Cayman Islands this morning?" Holloway froze. His hand hovered over the folder. Slowly, he flipped it open. I watched the blood drain from his face. It was instantaneous. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the sheer naked terror of a man caught red-handed. "Where Dot? Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "It doesn't matter," I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "What matters is that I have a copy, and so does my lawyer. If I don't call him in exactly 10 minutes to tell him to stand down, this file goes to the FBI and the press." Holloway looked around the restaurant frantically, as if looking for an escape route. You can't do this." "This is blackmail." "It's leverage," I corrected him. "You blocked my shipment illegally because my sister paid you off." "I'm just balancing the scales." He swallowed hard, loosening his tie. "What do you want? Money? I can pay you." "I don't want your dirty money," I said coldly. "I want 2 things. First, you release the Nexus containers immediately. You call the dock right now on speaker and tell them it was a clerical error." "And the second?" he asked, sweat beading on his forehead. "You own 15% of the shares in the new lithium processing plant. A silent partner, right?" I tapped the folder. "You're going to sell them, to me, at market value." "Are you insane?" he hissed. "Those shares are my retirement." Prison doesn't have a 401k director, I said, checking my watch. You have 2 minutes left. He stared at me, hatred burning in his eyes, but he knew he was beaten. With a shaking hand, he pulled out his phone. Fine, he choked out. You win. An hour later, I walked into the Sterling Global penthouse office. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, making my hands tingle. Liam was standing by the window. He turned as I entered, a wide grin splitting his face. The trucks are moving, he said, and the transfer of shares just cleared. We own the supply chain, Elara. We're untouchable. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, dropping my bag onto the sofa. He folded faster than I expected. Men like him always do when they face real power, a voice rumbled from the corner. Silas Sterling was sitting in his leather armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He wasn't looking at the city view. He was looking at me. You didn't just solve the problem, Silas said, standing up. You eliminated the threat and acquired a strategic asset in the process, ruthless. I did what I had to do, I said, suddenly feeling self-conscious under his intense gaze. Nexus is safe. Nexus is irrelevant, Silas said, waving his hand dismissively. I frowned. Excuse me? I just broke several laws and terrified a government official to save it. You saved it, Silas agreed, walking toward me. But you proved something much more important. He stopped in front of me. For the first time since we met on that park bench, he smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his eyes. You are ready, he said softly. Ready for what? I asked, glancing at Liam. Liam just nodded, knowing what was coming. I'm tired, Elara, Silas said, sighing. I've been building this empire for 40 years. I have no children, no heirs. I've been looking for a successor, someone who has the brain to build and the spine to fight. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy iron key. He placed it in my hand. I'm not just making you the permanent CEO of Nexus, Silas announced, his voice ringing with authority. As of this morning, I am retiring. I am appointing you as the CEO of Sterling Global. My breath hitched. I stared at the key. Silas ... That's the parent company. That's everything. That's billions of dollars. It's yours, he said firmly. You were ignored. You were underestimated. And look at you now. I closed my fingers around the cold metal of the key. I wasn't the girl crying in the rain anymore. I won't let you down, I whispered. I know, Silas said. Now go take your seat. You have a company to run. 30 seconds to air, Miss Vance. The stage manager, a woman with a headset and a clipboard, looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. I stood in the wings of the massive convention center stage, the roar of the press pack audible even through the heavy velvet curtains. Do I look ready? I asked, turning to Liam. He reached out and adjusted the lapel of my white suit jacket, a stark contrast to the red dress I'd worn at the gala. This wasn't a party. This was a coronation. You look like the person who just bought the city, Liam said, his grin sharp. Remember, look right down the barrel of the center camera. Make eye contact with the world. I'm not looking at the world, I whispered, tightening my ponytail. I'm looking at 3 specific people. 10 seconds. The manager hissed. Go, Liam said, stepping back. Showtime. I walked out. The moment my heel hit the stage, the flashbulbs erupted. It was like walking into a lightning storm. A wall of white light blinded me, accompanied by the frantic clicking of shutters. I walked to the podium, placed my notes down, though I didn't need them, and leaned into the microphone. The room went silent. I could see the confusion rippling through the front row of journalists. They were expecting Silas Sterling. They were expecting an old industry titan. Instead, they got me. Good morning, I said, my voice booming through the speakers, steady and calm. My name is Elara Vance, a murmur broke out. I waited for it to settle. For the past 40 years, Sterling Global has been the bedrock of this industry. I continued. But today, we are not just looking at the past. We are securing the future. As the newly appointed CEO of Sterling Global, my first act of leadership is to announce a strategic acquisition. I paused for effect. I looked directly into the camera lens with the red light. I imagined Sarah sitting in her office, her feet on the desk, dropping her coffee mug. I imagined my father freezing in his leather chair. As of this morning, I announced, Sterling Global has acquired Kincaid Industries. The room exploded. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions. Kincaid was Vance Corp's biggest rival. By buying them, I hadn't just expanded our portfolio. I had surrounded my father's company. I had cut off their distribution, their tech support, and their market leverage in a single stroke. We will be integrating Kincaid's logistics with our Nexus technology immediately, I said, talking over the shouting. Thank you. That is all. I turned and walked off stage, ignoring the desperate cries of the press. Back in the green room, Nina was waiting. She was bouncing on the balls of her feet, holding my phone. You did it! She screamed, rushing to hug me. Did you see their faces? CNN is already running the headline, "The Vance Dynasty Split." Give me the phone, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. She handed it to me. The screen was lit up with notifications. It was vibrating so hard it felt like it was going to explode in my hand. 12 missed calls, 47 text messages. I looked at the top notification. It was from Julian. Elara, baby, please pick up. We need to talk. I made a mistake. I didn't know. I scrolled down. Sarah, you think you're smart? You can't do this to family. Answer me, and then the phone rang again in my hand. The caller ID flashed a picture of a stern-faced man. Father. I stared at the screen. For years, I would have killed for this. I would have done anything for him to call me, to acknowledge me, to ask for my opinion. He's calling, Nina whispered, looking at the screen. Are you going to answer? My thumb hovered over the green button. I could hear his voice in my head demanding, dismissive, expecting me to fall back in line. Daughter, fix this. No, I said softly. Elara? Liam stepped into the room, watching me closely. I looked at the phone one last time. I saw the desperation in the vibrating screen. They weren't calling because they loved me. They were calling because they were afraid of me. I handed the phone back to Nina. Block them, I said. Nina blinked. Who? Julian? All of them, I said, my voice hardening into steel. My father, Sarah, Julian. Block every number. Filter every email to spam. If they show up at the building, security doesn't let them pass the lobby. You're cutting them off completely? Liam asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm not doing this for their approval anymore, Liam, I said, picking up a bottle of water and taking a long, satisfying sip. I don't want their apologies. I want their surrender. I turned to the monitor on the wall where the news anchor was still discussing my speech. And the only way to get that, I added, is to crush them. The leather of the executive chair was cool against my back. I sat facing the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the ant-sized cars crawl through the rainy streets below. I didn't need to look at the door to know they had arrived. I could hear the desperate, hurried footsteps in the hallway. They're here, Liam said from the doorway. His voice was grim but satisfied. Your father looks like he hasn't slept in a week. Sarah is shaking. Good, I said, keeping my chair turned away from the entrance. Send them in. I heard the heavy oak doors creak open. The shuffle of expensive shoes on the carpet followed. The air in the room shifted, growing heavy with tension and the scent of my father's expensive, overpowering cologne scent that used to terrify me. Now it just smelled like desperation. Mr. Sterling? My father's voice rang out, trembling slightly. Thank you for seeing us on such short notice. We. We understand you've been traveling. I remained silent, staring at the gray clouds. Sir? Father cleared his throat. I am Robert Vance. This is my daughter Sarah and my VP Julian. We are here to discuss a strategic partnership. It's a bailout, Father, Sarah hissed in a whisper loud enough for me to hear. Don't sugarcoat it. We can't make payroll on Friday. Quiet, Sarah. Father snapped. He composed himself. The Green Tech Initiative has hit a few snag points. The market didn't respond as we anticipated. We just need a temporary infusion of capital to restructure. It wasn't the market, Sarah interrupted, her voice shrill and defensive. It was the source material. The initial proposal was flawed. The technical specs were garbage. I couldn't build a working prototype because the person who wrote it was an idiot. I smiled. The irony was delicious. The specs were perfect, I said, my voice low. The room went dead silent. Excuse me? Julian asked, stepping forward. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, you haven't seen the files. I don't need to see them, I said, gripping the armrests. I wrote them. I don't understand, Father stammered. Mr. Sterling has retired, Liam announced from the side of the room, his voice cutting through the confusion like a blade. You are addressing the new CEO of Sterling Global. I kicked off the floor and spun the chair around. The motion was smooth, deliberate. I locked eyes with them instantly. "Hello, Father," I said. The reaction was visceral. Sarah gasped, stumbling back as if she'd been physically struck. She grabbed Julian's arm to steady herself. Julian's mouth opened and closed like a fish. My father just froze. He stared at me, his face draining of all color until he looked like a wax statue. "Elara?" He whispered. It came out as a wheeze. "This ... is a joke." "Do I look like I'm laughing?" I asked, leaning forward and clasping my hands on the desk. "You're the CEO?" Sarah shrieked, her eyes bulging. "You? But you single quotes re ... You're you. You can't run a lemonade stand, let alone a conglomerate." "And yet," I said, gesturing to the massive office, "here I am, buying their company." "Elara," Julian stepped forward, a nervous, sweating smile plastered on his face. "Elara, look. This is amazing. I knew you'd land on your feet. We're family, right? You wouldn't let Vance Corp go under." "Family?" I raised an eyebrow. "Funny, I seem to remember being escorted out of the building by security guards while you held Sarah's hand." Julian flinched and looked down. "Elara, please," Father said, stepping toward the desk. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic pleading. "The company is everything. It's my legacy. It's your legacy, too. You have to help us. Sarah ... Sarah made mistakes. The green tech launch failed. It failed because she didn't understand the code," I said coldly. "Because she stole a project she didn't have the brainpower to execute, and you backed her." "I made a mistake," Father admitted, his voice cracking. "I backed the wrong child. I see that now. You were the genius all along. Please, save us." I looked at them, the mighty Robert Vance begging. The golden child Sarah trembling, the ambitious Julian cowering. "I can save you," I said calmly, leaning back in the leather chair. "I have the capital to absorb your debt and fix the green tech flaws in a week. I'm afraid the plain daughter is the only one who can save you." Hope flared in my father's eyes. "Thank you, Elara, I knew." But I cut him off, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "My price is high." I slid the thick document across the polished mahogany desk. It spun slowly, stopping right at the edge, inches from my father's trembling hands. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the ragged breathing of the three people standing before me. "Read it," I said softly. "I don't need to read legal jargon, Elara," Father said, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Just tell us the damage. What do you want?" "It's simple," I said, leaning back and crossing my legs. "Sterling Global acquires 100% of Vance Corp. We absorb your debt. We fix the green tech production line. The company survives." "And in return?" Father asked, his eyes darting to the pen I had placed on top of the paper. "In return," I said, looking directly at Sarah, "you step down as chairman." Sarah was gripping the back of a chair, her knuckles white. "Sarah is removed from the company entirely," I finished. "She leaves the building today with a cardboard box, just like I did." "You can't do that," Sarah screamed, lunging forward. "I am the face of this company. I am the brand." "You are a liability," I corrected her coldly. "Your face is associated with a failing product and a fraud investigation. You're poison to the stock price, Sarah. You go or the deal is off." "Dad!" Sarah grabbed Father's arm, shaking him. "Tell her she's crazy. You can't fire me. I'm your daughter." Father looked down at the contract, then back at Sarah. He looked old. Defeated, he didn't speak. Robert listened to her. Julian suddenly spoke up. Sarah turned to him, her eyes wide with relief. "See? Julian agrees." "Tell him, Julian." Julian stepped away from Sarah, creating a physical gap between them. He looked at my father, his face twisting into a mask of desperate sincerity. "She's right, Robert," Julian said, his voice loud and clear. "Sarah ruined the project. I told her the specs were wrong, but she wouldn't listen. She was arrogant. It's her fault we're in this mess." Sarah's mouth fell open. "Julian, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're incompetent." Julian shouted at her, then spun around to face me. "I was blinded. She manipulated me. She made me think you were the one holding us back." He walked toward the desk, reaching out a hand as if to touch mine. I didn't flinch. I just stared at his hand until he pulled it back. I always knew you were special, Elara, Julian whispered, his voice dripping with fake emotion. I made a mistake. A huge mistake, but we can fix this, you and me. Running the company together just like we planned in college. I looked at him. I waited for the anger to come. I waited for the heartbreak. But there was nothing, no fire, no pain. Just a cold, vast ocean of indifference. You're pathetic, I said flatly. Julian flinched as if I'd slapped him. Elara, quiet, I ordered. I looked at my father. The clock is ticking, father. Sign the papers, or I call the bank and tell them to foreclose on your house. Father looked at Sarah, who was sobbing silently now, realizing she had lost everything. Then he looked at Julian, who was cowering like a beaten dog. Slowly, painfully, Father picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly the tip tapped against the paper. I built this company from nothing, he whispered, his voice cracking. And you almost destroyed it because you valued appearance over substance, I said. He signed his name. It was a messy, jagged scrawl. He dropped the pen and looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I backed the wrong child, he admitted, the words heavy with regret. I picked up the contract and checked the signature. Yes, I replied, closing the folder with a sharp snap. You did. The Q3 reports are in, Liam announced, walking into my office without knocking. He dropped a heavy file onto the glass desk. Vance Corp isn't just surviving, Elara, it's thriving. Profits are up 40% since the acquisition. I didn't even open the file. I just swiveled my chair to face the skyline. I told you, efficiency over ego. You were right, he admitted, leaning against the doorframe. By the way, reception called. Julian is downstairs again. Apparently, he has a groundbreaking business proposal that only you can hear. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. Let me guess, he wants to leverage our past connection? Something like that, Liam smirked. I told security to ban him from the premises permanently. If he shows up again, they'll call the police. Good, I said, standing up. He made his choice. I don't look back. And Sarah? Liam asked, his voice softening slightly. Any regrets on that front? I stopped by the mall yesterday, I said, walking toward the balcony doors. I saw her working at that discount clothing store. She was folding the same pile of shirts over and over, looking exhausted. She saw me, Liam. She didn't scream. She didn't sneer. She just looked down and kept folding. She's finally learning the value of $1, Liam noted. She's learning that the world doesn't owe her anything, I corrected. A lesson I learned a long time ago. I pushed the doors open and stepped out onto the balcony. The wind whipped my hair, but I didn't care. The city lights glittered below like a sea of diamonds I now owned. Liam stepped up beside me. He held out a crystal flute. Dom Perignon, he said. No more cheap Prosecco in the corner. I took the glass, the cold sten grounding me. I looked at him. He wasn't trying to save me. He wasn't trying to own me. He was just standing with me to the takeover. He proposed, clinking his glass against mine. To the truth, I whispered. I took a sip. The bubbles were sharp and sweet. I looked out at the horizon. They had ignored me. They had underestimated me. They thought I was nothing but a shadow in the room. I won, I said softly to the wind. Yes, Liam answered, you did. I'm Elara Vance, the CEO, and my life has finally begun.